In 1920, a 20-year-old wrestler from the mudpits of Kolhapur stepped onto an Olympic mat in Antwerp. India had never won an Olympic wrestling bout. It had never produced an individual medalist as an official national contingent. And Dinkarrao Shinde was about to come dangerously close to changing both. Born on 2nd June 1900 in Kolhapur, Shinde grew up in one of India's great wrestling strongholds. Here, wrestling wasn't learned inside air conditioned gyms, it was forged inside taleems, traditional training grounds where wrestlers practice kushti in mud pits. Following a culture cultivated for generations and strongly supported by Kolhapur's then ruler, Chhatrapati Shahu Maharaj. Little reliable information survives about Shinde's family or childhood, but we know where he learned to wrestle. And by 1920, he was good enough to be selected at India's hurried Olympic trials in Pune. His destination was almost unimaginable for an Indian wrestler of that era, the Olympic Games. Shinde joined India's first official Olympic contingent, sailed from Bombay aboard the SS Mantua, and trained in London before traveling to Antwerp. But there was a problem. The wrestling waiting for him in Europe wasn't the wrestling he had grown up with. Traditional Indian wrestling and Olympic freestyle demanded different techniques. Shinde had to adapt to opponents accustomed to attacks and takedowns outside his familiar Talim tradition. Then came his first Olympic bout. Across the mat stood Britain's Henry Inman. Shinde defeated him, and with that victory, a wrestler from Kolhapur became the first Indian to win an Olympic wrestling bout. But he wasn't finished. Shinde advanced through the competition until suddenly, astonishingly, he was within reach of an Olympic medal. He lost in the semi final. One opportunity remained bronze. Win, and India would have an individual Olympic wrestling medal in its very first games as an organized contingent. However, Shinde lost. He finished fourth. There was no medal. Yet, it was the finest individual performance by any member of the India's five-man 1920 team. And perhaps more importantly, Shinde had demonstrated something. An athlete developed through India's indigenous wrestling tradition could travel to Europe, adapt on the fly, and defeat international opposition. India's team management noticed that. After the Games, wrestling was identified as one of the sports in which India could potentially achieve future Olympic success. It would take another 32 years. In 1952, in the form of KD Jadhav, finally, who won independent India's first individual Olympic medal as a bronze. In wrestling, decades later, came Sushil Kumar, Yogeshwar Dutt, Bajrang Punia, and others. But the trail stretches back to Antwerp. Shinde returned to Kolhapur after the Olympics and died on August 18, 1962. Much of his life between those two moments remains undocumented, but one achievement survives. Before the academies, before India's Olympic wrestling medals, before the champions whose names became famous, a 20-year-old wrestler walked out of a Kolhapur mud pit and onto an Olympic mat in Belgium. He defeated his first opponent. He came within one victory of a medal, and he showed India something it had never seen before. An Olympic wrestling podium was indeed possible.